Hey everyone, welcome back to the next episode of Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. If you're a new listener or viewer of Game of Crimes, a special welcome to you because you've come to the right place to see and hear some of the best true crime content anywhere. This week's guest is Ramesh Nyberg, a retired 27-year veteran of the Miami Dade Police Department. And get this, he spent 22 of those years working as a homicide detective in Dade County. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. Once again, I want to say thank you for listening to and watching the Game of Crimes. As most of you know, I've started posting our guest interviews on YouTube. If you haven't checked us out yet, I encourage you to go to YouTube, type in Game of Crimes Podcast in the search bar at the top, and see what you think. And while you're there, go ahead and click on the subscribe button, the like button, and feel free to share with all your friends. This won't cost you anything other than a minute or two of your time, but it really helps promote the show. I know none of this would be possible without your support, and I really do appreciate you giving me your time. If you like what you're hearing on Game of Crimes, you can get even more content on our Patreon channel. Just go to patreon.com/gameofcrimes. There you'll find several bonus episodes each month, ranging from serious and current topics to some silly and fun events. And you can even get early audio access to each week's interviews before they drop on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcasts. You can even subscribe for free and hear the first 5 minutes of each episode to help you decide if you'd like to spend some of your hard-earned money to hear more. That's patreon.com/gameofcrimes. Now, my guest this week is Ramesh Nyberg, a man who worked for 27 years as a law enforcement professional in South Florida, primarily with the Miami-Dade Police Department. Now, some of you might remember that department's name was formerly Metro Dade Police or Dade County Sheriff's Department or Dade County Public Safety Department. Obviously, they've gone through several name changes, right? But as I said, Ramesh spent 22 of those years working as a homicide detective in Dade County, Florida. He started his career in 1979. So when he was around as Miami and Dade County grew from a small, sleepy vacation spot with lots of farmland to a major city that, you know what, I love it very much. Unfortunately, that growth was spurred by the influx of Colombian cocaine. And with the cocaine, you know what came along? The violence came along all throughout South Florida. Ramesh was there to see it all. He worked many homicides associated with the drug activity, as well as the case of a well-known organized crime figure out of the Boston area, someone that you might have heard of, James Whitey Bulger. You're going to hear about that. Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to get an inside look into what a major city homicide investigator does and hear some of the stories that you most likely won't hear anywhere else. But be warned, some of the things Ramesh talks about might just make your skin crawl. I'm serious. So I'm asking you, are you ready to hear about Ramesh's adventure? If so, it's time to get in, sit down, shut up, and hold on. Welcome back to the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the next episode of Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. And here, yours truly here, Murph is with you today. Got another fantastic guest with us today. This gentleman is a 27-year veteran law enforcement professional. Spent all his police career in South Florida, but his last 22 years, he was a homicide detective for the Miami-Dade Police Department. And that's, if you don't know where Miami-Dade is, the first word gives it away. It's in Miami. Okay, so I've read most of his book that he's got out, and I'm going to tell you more about it throughout the show here, and I'll cover that in the outro as well. But, you know, I say this about everybody we have on here that has a book. You got to read it. If you've ever been interested in homicide investigations, this is the book to read. Oh, my gosh. I think we're going to refer our guest today for psychological counseling after this interview because I don't know how anybody can survive that and spend a number of years on a cold case squad. So that's just really, really interesting. But ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest today, Ramesh Nyberg. Ram, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm glad to be here.
Well, after we talk a little bit, you might say, what the hell was I thinking? But this is, as you'll see, Ram, this is more like a conversation between
Yeah,
friends.
that's
It's
fine.
law enforcement professionals talking to each other. We bring in military, we bring in first responders, and it's all about showing the world what people are willing to do for their fellow man. And you, brother, are right there at the top of the list. But before we get started, everybody, we have our regular weekly session that we call the Small Town Police Blotter. And before we get started on that, let me just throw out this quick disclaimer that Game of Crimes, this is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things, about bad people doing bad things to good people. Now, we do take these stories seriously, but we like to have lots of fun, especially at the expense of some of the crazy things that criminals do. I surprised Ron with this just before we started this and said, hey, I got two stories. And of course, with you still being in Florida and me being in Florida, well, today we have two Florida stories, which there are no shortage of crazy criminal stories in this state. But brother, if you go ahead and take it away, and I'll follow behind you.
Well, here we go. I guess this is some sort of rite of passage, Steve, I suppose, of your show. But the headline is Man Denies Ownership of Syringes Found in His Rectum During Jail Strip Search. A Florida man denied ownership of 3 syringes removed from his rectum during a 4:30 a.m. strip search at a county jail, according to a criminal complaint. Cops arrested Wesley Scott, 40, early Friday on an outstanding warrant charging him with drug possession. While being searched in the field, Scott denied having any illegal items concealed on or in his body. But when Scott arrived at the Pinellas County Jail and was subject to a strip search, he removed 3 syringes from his rectum and provided them to a jailer.
Oh.
Scott then claimed that he found the syringes and that they were not his. Anything's possible, Steve.
How'd they get there?
This explanation did not stop officials from charging Scott with introducing contraband into a correctional facility, which is a felony. He is being held on $5,000 bond. The court filing does not reveal whether Scott named the purported owner of the syringes that had been found in his rectum, or whether that individual had consented to his works being stored in such a facility. There you have it.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, there's so many bad things you could say
about one of my
that.
cases, Steve. I just a disclaimer there.
But did you have any similar?
Well, no. I mean, and they would have died, so that would have been the thing.
Oh, my goodness. It's crazy. We've had several former bad guys on here and former gang members, Mexican Mafia and Aryan Brotherhood, and they talk about hiding weapons in that little secret spot there. And I'm thinking one guy had was it a 10-inch long revolver? It had a 6-inch barrel, so the total length of the revolver was 10 inches up his rear end.
Jeez.
Oh, man.
Well, back in the 80s, had these people called body packers, and they were smuggling cocaine any way they could into the country. Some of them were swallowing condoms full of cocaine. Mm-hmm. Some of them were stuffing them where the sun don't shine. Yep. And sometimes those things would explode inside their body, and that would be the end of them.
Yeah.
Not a real peaceful way to go from what we saw.
You're not kidding. Yeah. It's the stupid things that criminals do. Now, for our next story out of Florida, this is an ex-con is facing felony charges after she used a stolen credit card to bail a woman locked up in a Florida jail. According to court filings, this is Lakeisha Brisbane. Now, she's 46 years old. She's old enough to know better, right? She used the victim's Visa card in 3 separate transactions totaling $850 with a Clearwater bail bonds company. Now, Brisbane, she took that stolen credit card, and she bailed out her friend, Shermaine Arnold, a 21-year-old female acquaintance. She was being held in the Pinellas County lockup. Records show that Arnold was jailed in November for ditching out on a $62 yellow cab fare. Now, that right there should be a felony. But since she also had an outstanding warrant in connection with a felony battery case in Miami-Dade County, her bond was set at $7,500. Arnold spent a week in custody before Brisbane went into 49th Street bail bonds, carrying the credit card issued in the name of an elderly male victim. Now, this is a female taken in a man's credit card. His name's on there. Brisbane signed several sales receipts, a multitude of other paperwork, and allowed the firm to photocopy her driver's license. Not the smartest criminal we've run into, is she? Court filings did not explain how Brisbane was allowed to make charges on a Visa card in someone else's name, and that was my first question. Brisbane was arrested Thursday on grand theft and credit card fraud charges, both felonies, released on $10,000 bond, which was posted by a second Clearwater firm P. Freddie Dixon bail bonds. Just that's just you think I think of the
Can't
top
make that
100
stuff up.
corporations in the United States when I hear P. Freddie
Hey,
Dixon
Freddie.
bail bonds.
Yeah, there you go.
Brisbane's a convicted felon who spent about 15 months in state prison following her conviction on various fraud charges. The only thing that surprised me about either one of these articles that we just read is the word of methamphetamine was not mentioned, because we have a rule here on Game of Crimes, and that's kids don't do meth.
There you go.
All right, man. Rob, thank you very much for doing that. I know it's kind of silly.
Sure. No, that was fun.
Our listeners keep writing in that they enjoy hearing that. And I got to tell you, sometimes I think I'm going to run out of material. Ain't going to happen.
No, never happened.
So I want to tell everybody how we met. And if you folks remember, on episode 152 of Game of Crimes, we had a retired New York City police officer, Vic Ferrari, who's written a number of books about the funny things inside the New York Police Department. I think he came out July this year, so it hasn't been out very long. We're in August now. I think I've gotten more comments from listeners about Vic and his stories than any other guest we've had on here, or at least in a long, long time. This is our 4th year of Game of Crimes. So being that it's part of that law enforcement family thing, we're always looking out for each other. And when we finished, he said, "Hey, if you're ever looking for guests," he said, "I know a guy, a retired homicide detective down in Miami, that's got some fantastic stories." So he introduced me. Vic reached out to you. You said it was okay to talk to you, and
Sure.
reached out. And I want to give a plug for Vic's podcast also. It's NYPD Through the Looking Glass. So you listeners, if you haven't listened to it and you want to hear funny stories, I mean, you heard Vic on here. I think I had tissues out that day. I was crying. I was laughing so hard I was crying.
He's a great storyteller, and he's got that New York accent, and really he's a lot of fun.
And he even makes the dangerous situation to where one of the cops is going to get killed one time. He made that funny. So he is a good storyteller. But so to get rolling here on your life, Ram, usually what we do is I start and ask, tell us a little bit about your background. I know yours is a little bit different. You were born in another country, but you came here at a very young age, and where you grew up, and you know, what were your family dynamics, your mom and dad, if you had siblings, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a kind of an unusual mixture, right? So my mom was from India. She came here in the 50s to study, and met my dad in Minnesota. My dad's white American from Swedish background. Mm-hmm. And they got married, and she got some leads on a job down here in Miami. But before that, she went back to India to have me because she was pregnant with me. So I was born there, and they came back here when I was less than a year old. I was about 11 months old when they arrived back here. And in those days, they didn't have much money. In those days, you could get a berth on a freighter. You know, you could get a little room on a freighter for like $25
Wow.
to go across the ocean. So that's how I arrived here, on a freighter on New Year's Day, 1959. How about that?
Wow.
So I kind of have boats and ships in my background. My dad was a boat builder. He built sailboats. He built them with his bare hands. I mean, he was quite the craftsman. And so we living in Miami, we did a lot of sailing. We were always on the water. Mm-hmm. And my dad was an artist and a boat carpenter, really. He made copper sculpture. He made some silver jewelry from time to time. He was just always in his workshop, hammering on something, sawing something. My mom was a music teacher in the school system. So we were fabulously wealthy.
I can tell.
Artist and a school teacher. But they worked very, very hard in family background in police work. We didn't have any police officers in the family. And I just got bitten by the police bug when I was about 19. Mm-hmm. Before that, I had no real idea I was going to get into law enforcement. And after that happened, I was all gung-ho for it. And one of the things I always loved to do as a kid was I loved to write. And I had some teachers when I was very young that taught me a love of words and how powerful words can be. So I started reading a lot. And as a result, I started writing. I just wrote on my own, and I love sports. I love football. And I used to write sports articles about stuff nobody asked me to. I just did it. I thought it was fun. I wanted to be a sports writer when I was a kid, right? Until I got interested in law enforcement. So when my parents found out I wanted to be a cop, they weren't thrilled, to say the least. I'll put it mildly. They
Sounds like
were
my
they were
parents.
they were almost panicked.
Yeah.
Um, my mom cried.
Oh,
She was terrified, and they said, "Look, one day your writing is going to rise up in your life," and they're right. It did. So here we are. But so I went into the police academy at the tender age of 21 in 1979, and I worked for a small department. But we can get into that. I don't want to you know do all the talking. I know you have questions to ask too.
oh, that and this is your story, so I'm gonna keep it focused on you because people have already figured out I'm an idiot here, so I don't need to
Well,
reinforce that
makes,
regularly.
makes two of us. So here we go.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
None. I actually had two half sisters, which means I have a whole sister if my math is correct there. I, I was never good at math, but that one I could figure out.
Yeah.
They're up in Minnesota, both of them, and we've stayed in contact over the years. I didn't even meet one of them until I was 12.
Wow.
I didn't even know they existed until I was 12 years old. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I grew up as an only child. As I said, we didn't have a whole lot of money, so there wasn't much to spoil me with. But I was very lucky that my dad loved to sail. That's what he lived for. We were always out on that boat, whether we wanted to or not. Come on, we're going sailing, and we were always out there in the water, diving for lobster, fishing, snorkeling. So I treasure those memories
I can
a lot.
imagine as a kid that would have to be exciting.
It was, and then there were 3 summers. I think I was 13 and 14 and 15, maybe, or a year off there. But we would sail to the Bahamas. So we would cross over the straits and go over to the Bahamas, sail around, live on the boat for 2 to 3 weeks at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just fantastic.
That sounds like so much excitement there.
Yeah, there was one time when we pulled into a little place in the Abacos, and I saw a newspaper, and I saw what date it was. I said, "Hey, Dad, I got to get back for school. School's about to open," And he didn't know. He didn't care. He'd sail the rest of the year if it was up to him. So they put me on a plane and sent me back home.
Did your mom ever go on those sailing trips?
Yeah, she never did the crossings because the crossings are they can be kind of grueling. They can be a little adventurous.
Yeah.
when the seas get high. But but she would fly over and meet us and stay with us for a week or so at a time.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I was reading in your book. I think your biggest excitement as a child was going over to the little bodega and getting baseball cards, wasn't it?
Football cards.
Football cards.
Yeah, I loved my football cards. Oh yeah, yeah. I had 2 or 3 shoe boxes full of them, and if I would have known that they would be valuable one day, I would have taken better care of them. But
isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
All those stupid little toys we had back then.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that people would pay such stupid money for old junk?
I had triples of John Unitas and Jim Brown and all these guys, and I just traded them with my friends, and some people don't know who we're talking about, so I don't want to get too far into.
Oh man, you just made me feel old there. I'm older than you, by the way. So. Did you play any sports in high school?
Yeah, I played football in high school. Wasn't a star or anything like that, but I loved the game. I always loved the game. So I was always torn between football and music. My mother was a music person when she ended up becoming a music professor at the University of Miami. So we always had music in our house, and I was kind of brought up to play instruments. I didn't have a whole lot of choice with that either. It was, sailing and music were 2 things I didn't have a choice in. But that was fine. I mean, that was great, and I played in the orchestra when I was a kid, and so I was always either playing football or playing music.
Yeah. Were you a big kid? Because you're a big man. How tall are you?
I'm 6'3".
Yeah. Were you a big kid in high school?
I topped out at this height when I was 15.
Wow.
So they had me at defensive end because I was one of the bigger kids on the team. Nowadays, hell, you go by the practice and the quarterbacks are 6'3" and 6'4".
Yeah.
And being 6'3" is nothing anymore.
Right.
But back then, I was one of the taller kids, and yeah, I never grew another inch after that.
Did they ever try to recruit you for basketball at that young age?
Oh yeah, they did. And it's funny, I was never really into basketball.
Yeah,
And I
me
think
either.
it might have been because growing up down here in the 60s, all we had was the Dolphins and the Hurricanes. You didn't have any other professional sports. We didn't have the Heat. We didn't have the Marlins. No,
Hmm.
hockey came much later. So that's really the only sport I was exposed to. It wasn't like a kid growing up north where they play all these different sports and they're exposed to them. And so I didn't really care for basketball. And the coaches used to stop me in the hallways at school. Hey, come out for basketball. And I go, I'll wait for football season.
Yeah. Um, did you? So when you were a kid, though, Miami hadn't really blown up in population size the way it is now, right?
It had not. Hadn't blown up in a lot of ways,
I
and
mean,
that was to come. It was kind of on a collision course that none of us really knew about was going to happen in the late '70s. But
mhm.
no, it wasn't a real big place. I mean, there are huge communities now in the greater Miami area, southwest of Miami, that used to be tomato fields and stuff. When I was a kid, people used to go quail hunting out there, and
Mhm.
now it's just condos as far as the eye can see.
Yeah,
Yeah, so everything changes and grows.
it does. It does, and Miami became very unique in the economy that helped it to grow.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, whichever I think everybody knows about that. I tell you what, when my first posting with it as a DEA agent was Miami. I got there in 1987, and it was still pretty wild then. And
Oh yeah. Oh
I'd
no,
been,
things were still going on well
mhm.
into, and even when the Colombian cartels quieted down, the Jamaicans were very much involved in the cocaine trade and every other thing, and we had a lot of violence from various gangs and things like that. So yeah, things never really quieted down in Miami probably about till early '90s.
Yeah, it's. I tell you, getting there in '87, and I'd been a cop for 12 years, but I'm a small town country boy. I was a city officer in Southern West Virginia, 35-man department, and then a railroad cop. And my wife and I, we moved to Miami, and you talk about fish out of water.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
quite a change.
It
Yeah.
was crazy. It was, and I know our regular listeners have heard this story over and over, but just for your benefit, by the time I got to DEA Miami, the most powder cocaine I'd ever seen at one time was 2 ounces, just a little baggie.
Right,
The
right.
first undercover trip I got to go on, we went to the Turks and Caicos Islands on an undercover boat, which I'd never heard of. It took us 5 days to get there. I was sick 3 of the days, but the boat captains were sick also, so I didn't feel so bad. But we picked up 400 kilos. So I went from 2 ounces to 880 pounds of coke. And
Right.
as everybody's heard me say, I was addicted to cocaine at that point, just in a different way.
Right. Weren't we all?
Man, of course, I was watching Miami Vice, and that was the big show. And it was just, I thought, man, I should have started this 10 years ago.
Right, right.
Anyway, it was a lot of fun, a lot of fun. It wasn't so much fun when my partner got shot in '89 there in Hialeah. I bet you were on the homicide squad back then. Do you remember a DEA agent getting shot? And it was over in Hialeah. The agent was shot and the informant was killed.
Yeah, I do remember that. What year
And
was that?
that was summer. I think it was late summer or early fall of '89.
Mm-hmm.
The main defendant last name was Peralta.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he escaped to New York, and about 3 weeks after the shooting, he surrendered. But we caught his accomplice and the getaway driver that night.
I think City of Miami or City of Hialeah handled that.
Oh, did they?
I think so, because they had their own homicide unit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was. I just spoke at a conference earlier this week here in Orlando. It was the Motor Vehicle Criminal Interdiction Conference, and it's mostly troopers, but there's some local and state officers from all around the United States and Canada, and just reminiscing with them about some of the stories. And my old DEA partner Javier Pena, we get up and tell the story about Pablo Escobar and all that stuff, and I always talk about my partner shooting because I made a lot of mistakes. We all made a lot of mistakes that day, and if somebody else can benefit it, we take benefit from learning. We take the time to tell the mistakes that we made.
Right.
And one of them was when I caught the guy out on the sidewalk that shot the informant, and he dropped his gun, so I couldn't shoot him. But we took him into custody, and I went over to my undercover car and called Miami base for, hey, we need backup, we need an ambulance, got an agent down, an informant down, all that stuff. And just within, I'm not kidding, it seemed like within seconds, I could hear sirens coming our way. And that's one of the most comforting sounds in the world when you're out there. You feel alone, but help's on the way. So
Right.
I'm standing in the middle of the street, and the only identification I had on was my badge hanging on a lanyard, because that's what they did in Miami Vice. That was cool,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
No ray jacket, no vest, no helmet. And I'm standing in the middle of the street holding a machine gun. I could see the Miami-Dade cruisers coming at me way down this long street. And then I see smoke coming up from under their cars. And I thought, what the hell? Did they blow an engine? And what it did, they had seen me with that machine gun and they locked them up. And then I
Right.
realized, hey, stupid, look at yourself. So
Yeah.
I laid that down and I raised my hands up, backed away from it, and they
Yeah.
slowly
That was
came
the
in.
smart thing to do. Yep.
My gosh, it was lessons learned there. So
Yeah.
when you graduated high school, what sort of 18?
I was 17, actually. I graduated a little earlier age. Yeah.
Did Dad put you to work at that point, or it seems like you might have gone into boat building since he was an expert at that?
Well, no, I mean, by that time, he actually had a small business. He was doing it. He had his own business, but by that time, it had long since dissolved. And I went right into college, a local college down at Miami, and I was actually a music major
Nice.
when I went in there. And then almost a year and a half later, I changed my major to criminal justice. And
That's why Mom cried.
oh yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, she was not happy. But yeah, that's when everything changed in my life.
Did obviously not the University of Miami. You said a small college. What college was it?
Miami Dade College.
Okay.
Dade College. Yeah.
And you got your degree in criminal justice there?
I have a bachelor's in criminal justice administration. Yeah.
Very good. Then, so what was it that happened at age 19 that you said, that's what I want to do?
Well, it's kind of a strange story. I mean, I was literally studying for a music theory exam with a buddy of mine named John Marcus, and John was fantastic, still is a great bass player. Ended up playing with Tim McGraw. For you country music fans out there, he was actually part of Tim McGraw's band for a long time. But John and I were studying in his apartment on Kendall Drive, and I heard this noise. I said, "What's that noise?" He goes, "Oh, that's the police scanner. I listen to the police scanner." So I said, "Well, show it to me." And I said, "What are they saying?" And he said, "Yeah, I've listened for a while and I've figured out some of the codes." And so, oh, that's interesting. And as we're talking, we see red lights coming through his window. Mm-hmm. And we looked out the window and a Metro police officer had pulled someone over across the street. And so we're looking at this and I can see the officer picking up his mic and I can hear him over John's scanner.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, this is cool. What's he saying? And we started looking at this and I thought, somehow the whole thing with the communication and the radio and the efficiency of all that stuff that I was watching kind of captured me. And I thought, I want to learn more about this. So I signed up for an observer ride. And 3 observer rides later, that's what I decided this is what I want to do.
Wow. And that, for our listeners, if you read Ram's book here, and let me just tell you now, his book is Badge, Tie, and Gun, Life and Death Journeys of a Miami Detective. You can read that whole story there. I've gotten through most of the book and I knew what the answers were, but it's always a lot better when you tell the story. So did you go apply or how'd you do that?
Yeah, I mean, after those, I started applying. At the time, there was a hiring freeze and the county was frozen. The city of Miami was frozen. I put in about 8 applications to various departments. And the city of Opelika, which is a little up in the northwest section of Dade County, it's a little high crime ghetto is what it was. I mean, it was a really rough town. Still is. They were the first ones to call me. And they said, come on down for an interview. And then after that, they said, we'll have you on board if you want to come on board. $12,000 a year. Let's go. And so I went into the police academy in 1979 and graduated. I think it was 5.5-month program. And man, we hit the ground running because by that time, Miami had started to really change. Miami was experiencing an explosion of crime. And most of it was due to this wave of cocaine being brought into the country. And it didn't slow down, as we talked about before, it didn't slow down from that point until almost a decade. But the early and mid 1980s were hopping. And in Opelika, whether it was drugs or not, there was always something going on. You were always going to a shooting or a stabbing or, various things were happening. And it was a great place to be a rookie cop. I'll tell you that, because you earned your stripes pretty quick out there.
I can't imagine. You're seeing things almost immediately in your career that a lot of officers never see in their entire careers.
Yeah, I
Because
mean, I think I went to my first shooting 2 or 3 weeks into my employment, but there was a lot of good cops there. Opelika had a corruption problem in the city, and things got a little messy, and so I got out of there. It's about 1/3 of the department left a year later.
mm,
We had a 33 man department, and 10 of us left
wow,
during about a 3 month period, and went to other departments. I ended up working with some of them, down the road in the county and other departments. We worked together.
if I remember right, in the book that you had a chief there when you first got there that was really progressive, was getting everything that would not put up with any foolishness.
Oh yeah, anybody that's been in law enforcement for a long time might know the name Reuben Greenberg. And Greenberg was, as you said, he was a hard nosed guy, but a very fair guy to work for. Probably
Mm-hmm.
best police chief I've ever worked for. And he was a hands on guy. He loved to be out in the community. He would come and back you up on calls, and he would support you 1,000% when you were right, and he would nail you if you were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But he demanded a lot from his officers, and I learned a tremendous amount from him. I was very lucky to have him as a chief. But they bounced him out of there because the powers that be in City Hall just didn't want a guy with that kind of insight,
Yeah.
let's say. And so they hired a guy that was just a yes man, and things kind of unraveled for a while, and that's when we started jumping ship.
It's what a shame. You've got your integrity, and that's the one thing you never give up. I mean,
That's
that's
right.
like virginity. Once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah. I mean, nobody's going to trust you if you can't
Exactly.
if you can't handle being honest and owning up. He didn't mind if you made mistakes and screwed up. Just own up to it.
Yeah.
And learn from it and keep moving on.
That's the thing.
He went on to the Charleston, South Carolina Police Department, which had a lot of troubles at the time. He turned that place around. He was featured on 60 Minutes because of that. And he was a great man. I think he passed away about 10, 12 years ago.
And so from Opelika, where'd you go?
I went to North Miami, which was right next door, but overall was a much quieter community, place where people waved to the police officers, which I kind of had to get used to. Usually it was a rock or a bottle coming our way, but here people were waving at us. So it had a little bit of a rough spot on the west side of town. But for the most part, it was, again, a department full of really high quality officers and supervisors. And I loved working there. I really did. But I got interested in homicide work, and that wasn't available to me at North Miami. We were only a 90-man department. The detectives there handled the mainstream stuff, the burglaries and the assaults and all that, but we didn't handle major crimes. North Miami, the county came and handled our major crimes, which the county did for a lot of small agencies.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's so many municipalities there in Dade County, Broward County, Palm Beach County. The dividing lines get blurred a lot of times. It's like a challenge to know where your jurisdiction ends and the next kind of person's begins.
I'll tell you, Steve, there's a lot of people that live in Dade County that don't know what municipality they live in. And that's the God's honest truth, because unless they really read the tax bill and look at it carefully, because we have 36 different jurisdictions within Miami-Dade County alone.
Wow.
36.
I had no idea it was anywhere near that.
Oh yeah. And that ranges from tiny little El Portal, which you could probably jog across in 5 minutes, to the county, which is gigantic. We got 3,500 sworn on the county.
Wow. That's a little bit more than the 35-man department I worked at.
Right. Yeah.
That's funny. That's almost as DEA worldwide only has, I think they're authorized 4,600 agents worldwide. You guys got 3,500 right there in Dade County.
Yeah, I think we still might be the largest police department in the Southeast United States. Wow.
That's pretty cool. I have to say, I got to meet a lot of you guys there. When I was with DEA there in '87, we were down the Coger Center next to the Doral Country Club. And it wasn't within a couple miles as where I think you guys had your training facilities and the SWAT teams worked out of. And we'd go down and use the ranges there to qualify. Yeah, you get to be friends with a lot of people there.
That's right.
We didn't join, but we used to stop by the PBA, the Police Benevolent Association
Oh yeah.
building there, and discuss operations over a cold drink.
Oh, they had a nice bar over there.
It's very nice.
Yeah,
And then they had cheap food.
they did. But the county, I got to say, Miami-Dade Police Department, as a large department, really afforded you a lot of different choices, right? As I said, in North Miami, it was you're either working uniform or you're working in DB and handling the burglaries and the other stuff. But the county, you could go to narcotics, you could go to canine, you could go to sexual battery, you could just endless amount of stuff you could do. So, and then there's 8 different uniform districts that you could work in. So when I went to the county, they put me down south, which I love because that's where I grew up. So I felt right at home there.
And down south, you're farther down than Kendall. You're down towards the Redlands.
Yeah, the Redlands was part of South District back then. I think it still is. We went from the county line, which was way down there close to the Everglades, near the Keys, all the way up to 152nd Street at that time. Now the borders have changed now, but it was a big, big district.
That was, I think that's one of the things I found a little bit shocking when I got to Miami was, you're in a metropolitan big time city doing major drug cases. And before you could get out of the county, you're back out in the cornfields and the soybean fields. And
oh yeah, well, that area you talked about the Redland. I remember going out there one time, taking a report of a stolen pig. Okay, and then my next call was all the way across on the other side of the district, a burglary of a $3 million mansion, we'll call the road, and then you might be in the ghetto on a drug possession case. So that made it fun because there was a wide variety of stuff you might end up doing.
Yeah. You had to be a jack of all trades to deal with all the different people that just lived within your jurisdiction there.
Yeah, for sure.
There was a South Miami detective that we used to work with a lot. I doubt that you know him. His name was Rick Rogers. Good old country boy.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, we had him on there. I mean, we just did so many things with him, and I think he lives up in Cedar Key now, retired. But
oh wow, not many people live there.
Yeah, he used to talk about rural. It's he's a good old boy. He talks like me, so it was funny because he called me one day and he said, "Hey Murph," he said, "there's some Georgia Bureau of Investigation agents down here. They've got a U-Haul truck with 2,500 pounds of weed in the back, and they want to make some cases, and they want to make cases where they're trading weed for coke." He said, we need another boy that talks country. You want to come in and work QC with us?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, I'll go."
That's great.
Yeah. And the GBI agent was JP Foster, who we kind of got to be friends there, but later on became best friends. He's married to a retired DEA agent. They live up in Georgia now. And that's the kind of people that when we go there, we visit them, and they come here, they come and visit us. Just like home friends. That's the one thing I really like about law enforcement culture.
Yes. You make friends for life. You really do.
Yep. After Miami PD, is that when you went to Miami Dade?
After North Miami, yes, I went to Miami Dade in 1982. Yeah.
And that's where you became one of the what do you call it, brown gown crew?
Yeah, we used to call it the brown gown because we had light brown shirts and dark brown pants. And I did my time in uniform there because they couldn't just throw me in homicide. They had to kind of prove myself all over again. And during that time, while I was waiting to go to homicide, I interviewed for homicide, but they didn't have an opening. Mm-hmm. And so I worked the uniform, and then I became an FTO, field training officer, trained some of the rookies coming out of the academy. I enjoyed that, and worked on a surveillance squad in plain clothes for about a year and a half, and then back in uniform again. And then one day I got the call, come to homicide. We got a position for you. That was exciting. That was 1985 when that happened.
Just to back up a tad here, when you got hired on Opelika, did they have an academy, or where did you go for training?
Well, at that time, all the agencies used one academy, and that was the Southeast Florida training. It was called Southeast Florida Institute of Criminal Justice, is what it was called. Everybody just called it the academy. Mm-hmm. So we had recruits from a whole bunch of different agencies. At the time that I went through, it was predominantly City of Miami. I think we had 33 in our graduating class, and 21 or so of them were City of Miami guys.
Wow.
And we only had 3 county guys. And then I was the only person with Opelika,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and it's changed over the years. There's some now I think the county does their academy classes predominantly all county.
Was that academy in Dade County?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it
Were
was.
there other counties from Florida that came to it?
No, they were all Dade County. Broward had its own similar type of arrangement up there. And at the time, the academy was held at the Miami-Dade College North Campus. That's where we reported to every morning. Our firearms range was out west in Doral.
Mm-hmm.
That property ended up becoming our training complex.
Yep.
And so today, that's where all the rookies go. That's where the academy is held.
And I mean, it's been, 30 plus years since I was there, but it was a decent facility back then.
Oh, yes. They have a really nice training facility there.
When we go there for firearms qualification, the SWAT guys would be there training. And I'm looking at all these guys thinking, are you guys all using steroids? Because their arms were as big as my legs, every one of them. Like, holy cow.
Well, they're not going on a dangerous call, which they do a lot of. They're working out.
Wow.
They're practicing their whatever, their strategies, and they're working out. Those guys are always working out.
Yeah, I think back then they had 3 different SWAT squads just because it was so busy.
Yeah.
It was impressive. Right. You get a small town country boy that comes in and seeing things like that, it's like, holy cow, this really is the big time.
All of us in police work end up at some time or another complaining about the department, bitching about this or bitching about that. But in retrospect, I'll tell you what, our department really was great on training. And I think the professionalism is really showed on the street. We had, compared to most departments that size, we had very few officers getting killed and hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It happened, tragically, it happened, but for the number of people we had out there, I think we did very well, and that includes getting in trouble with corruption and other nasty stuff like that. We stayed out of the newspapers more than most departments, way more than the city of Miami did.
We all remember the Miami River Cops case.
Oh yeah, well that was actually a county case. We actually handled that.
Jeez. I was stationed in Bogota, Colombia from 91 to 94. And they actually captured one of the cops in Colombia while I was there. And I was one of the guys that we put him on a DEA airplane and transported him back to Miami. And you don't talk about the case because you don't want to jeopardize anything, screw up a prosecution. But he was reserved to the fact that, he'd done wrong and it's time to go pay the piper. And
if I'm not mistaken, was that Armando Un was his name or something like that. I can't remember his name now.
Yeah, but I'm surprised I remember my own name some days.
He was on the run for a while.
Yeah.
He was a fugitive for a while.
It was when we made the call to whoever the lead investigators were based on NCIC. They were pretty excited.
Yeah.
So we make no bones about it here on Game of Crimes. Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. So I have no sympathy for those people. You make your decisions and you live with the consequences.
Well, that's going back to Reuben Greenberg. I remember he actually told me that when he hired me, and he said, "There are cops doing stuff out there, but in my department, you either decide to be a cop or a criminal. You're not going to be both."
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think I could have worked for that man. I understand why you want to go to a bigger department, but how did you get interested in homicide?
Well, it was really on a call. I went to a shooting. It was a robbery and shooting at a Publix supermarket. And if those of you who don't know South Florida, Publix is a huge supermarket chain. They're everywhere. And this man was coming out with some groceries. I think it was around 10 o'clock at night or something. And some robbers came up and attacked him and killed him. The guy was unarmed. He couldn't have given them a fight if he wanted to, but they killed him and took, I think, about $80 from it. Older gentleman, 67. I say older, hell, man. I'm going to turn 67 soon. But I did my thing as a uniform officer. I roped off the scene and I found some witnesses and I kind of separated the witnesses. And so the homicide guys get there and I'm watching them work. And one of them comes over to me and starts talking to me. And I started watching them and thinking, man, these guys are going to be working all night long if they have to. And Why wouldn't they? I mean, this is the death of an innocent man here. And it just kind of hit me, man, I want to do this. That's what I want to do. So that's what caused me to leave North Miami and go to the county, because otherwise I had no opportunity to get into homicide.
Mm-hmm. I always kind of pictured it as homicide is the ultimate crime, the highest priority crime, because you've taken a human life.
Right.
And in our small town, I mean, we might have 1, 2, maybe 3 murders a year. It just rarely happened. But if you were the responding officer, you wanted to, just like you said, you want to participate as much as you can. We only had 3 detectives back then. Typically, they were crimes of passion, or somebody that knew somebody, or it's a revenge over a girlfriend, or maybe a drug debt, or whatever it might be. There's not a whole lot of different ideas you can come up with to commit a murder.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall anything like serial murder or anything, but it was interesting. It was gory. I read in your book where the first, it might have been that first body where you were kneeling over it and asking what everything was there. You thought it was brain matter, but it was something else.
It was puke. My face is about 3 inches from it. I'm trying to be this inquisitive young rookie cop here and learning everything. And the crime scene guy goes, "No, that's puke." And I got off pretty quick after that.
Well, then, and I don't mean to jump ahead here, but I was reading yesterday about one of the suicides you went into, where I think the lady had shot herself 6 times. And for our listeners, we're not making this up, because when I first read it, I thought, this is bullshit. Nobody shoots themselves 6 times. That's impossible. Yeah, and after reading through it, I understood it, but especially after the medical examiner gave his findings. But you're standing there and all of a sudden things are dripping on you.
Well, that was a different, you're talking about a different homicide.
Was it?
It was a different case.
Okay.
Yeah. You're talking about the young lady that put the 357 in her mouth.
Yeah.
Blew her head off. Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. And I'm standing there and I'm taking notes, and I hear the faucet dripping, and I'm looking around and there's no bathroom. And then the next thing I know, a piece of brain matter falls on my legal pad.
Oh.
And I went, that's what's dripping. She was dripping. And that was a real wake up call. I tell you.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I think I put in the book that at that time I had never really truly appreciated what it meant to get some air.
Mm-hmm.
But I walked out of there and I went out to the driveway and I took a few deep breaths, and then all right, I go back in there. Now that I know what's happening, I'll go back in there.
Well, just the smell that's associated, even if it's not a decomposing body yet, just the smell of blood and organs, and when bowels release and things like that, is just, you got to be cut out for that kind of work. I don't think that's something that I could have done full time like you did.
Well, yeah, not everybody is cut out for it, but you do. You go through a period of time where you start getting conditioned to it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're brand new in homicide, when you're the FNG, as they call it, homicide, you're given all the nasty stuff. If a decomp comes in, you're going out on the decomposition.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to see that you can handle it. They want to see that you can handle all the joking and ribbing and all that stuff that we do in law enforcement with each other. Yeah. And not get offended. And once you pass all those little tests, they'll let you start handling homicides on your own.
Mm-hmm.
When I say on your own, you'll be assigned to homicide as the lead investigator. All right. We worked on a team concept, so you were never really alone when you were working a murder case. You had a squad of detectives working with you.
Well, you'd have to. I mean, some of them, especially some of the ones that you wrote about, there's just massive amounts of leads. It'd been impossible for one person to follow up on all those leads.
Right.
You wouldn't have enough days left in your life to hit all those things, not do a good job.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. So you get over there, and that's another funny thing about law enforcement. When you transfer into a new squad, especially homicide, the way you described it in your book, it's like starting all over again and being a rookie, and you have to pay your dues over and over again. It was the same way in DEA. When you transfer to a new office, be ready, because you're the new guy. You're the FNG.
Yeah, that's really true. That's really true. And I think humility goes a long way. And those of you who are listening who might want to go into law enforcement, remember humility and patience. It'll take you a long way. And you're not going to be accepted right away. You're going to have to kind of prove yourself every time, like you said. You even go to a new office, get transferred to a new assignment or whatever it is. And in homicide, it was even more, because They didn't care that you'd been on 10, 12, 14 years. You're new in homicide and you got new stuff to learn because it's not like any place else.
Yeah, that's a very specialized skill.
And we had,
Skill set.
and you can't be afraid to work and work long hours and be detailed about your work. We had a sign on the door that said Goya Cod, Goyakod, and it stood for get off your ass and knock on doors.
Yeah.
And that was our motto. That was our motto. And we reminded each other of it from time to time, like, okay, how are we going to find this witness? And what are we going to, Goya Cod, man, let's go. We're not going to find him inside the office.
Yep.
So
that
was a real, that was our culture.
Yeah.
That was our culture.
That's one of the reasons I went into law enforcement was because I just wanted to have a job outdoors. I didn't want to be in an office all the time. And as your career progresses, and not that I'm bitching and complaining about the young people of today that come on the job, but it was amazing how many of these college graduates would come into the academy and come into the office. They're like, well, where's my desk? I want a desk over here next to the window. and I don't want that old desk car. I want a new car. Don't you have a new car I can have? And sitting there in the office, like, when are you going to go out and make a case? Well, I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at that, and I'm like, I don't see a drug trafficker in this office anywhere. And then if you're in a supervisory role and you say that, it carries a little bit of weight. But when your pod mates get your case, that carries a lot of weight.
Oh yeah. No, I mean you're beholden to those squad members. You depend on each other for a lot of things, and you're not going to put anything over on them.
No.
And everybody expects the same amount of work from each other. Nobody's gonna put up with half-ass work.
We in the old days too. Well, you tell me if this is the way it was where you were, because I was up in the hills of West Virginia, and well, this was true even on DEA. You had disagreements with each other because everybody's got big egos and type A personalities. And we did a lot of our planning in a bar after work. And sometimes you might step out the back alley and duke it out with each other and come back in and wipe the blood off and lean on each other and laugh about it and have another beer. And next day, everything's good to go.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, everybody wants to believe that they're really good at what they do and that they know what they're doing. And that they know the right way to do things. And sometimes tempers will flare but we didn't allow those things to fester because we couldn't afford to not be working together well.
Right.
And it was like, hey man, you got a problem with me? Let's go. It didn't happen that often in homicide that you go duke it out with somebody. Although that did happen at the bar a couple of times, actually, come to think of it.
I think it's the same
but
everywhere.
If we were in the office, let's go into the interview room, and they go in there and you'd hear shouting and cussing and whatever, and it come out like, okay, we worked it out.
Yeah.
We worked it out. Confront the problem and fix it.
And you're still a team.
By communicating. You're still a team.
Yeah.
That's still a team.
You've been retired a little while now, so you know how it is. It's just not the same, is it?
I don't think so. I don't think it'll ever be the same. And what you were talking about, that rite of passage kind of thing where, you come in and you got all these expectations. Like, give me a new desk, give me a new car. I mean, yeah, it was 1979, but when I was a rookie cop in Opelika, they gave me the junker car, man. They gave me a car with no air conditioning. The air conditioner didn't work. This is in South Florida. You got a vest on and the whole thing. Same thing in homicide. Like, you don't get your own desk. For a while, none of us had our own desks, but the senior guys were gonna, they were going to control the desk and the phone, and you're going to use it when you have a chance.
Yeah.
And it changed. It all changed in the late '80s when we moved to another building and we all had our own desks and everything was a little more sanitized and modern looking.
And that's how you build respect and trust for each other. Because without those things, this not just homicide, nothing in law enforcement is going to work if you can't trust your partner. So
yeah, and I think back in the uniform days, I mean, we had fun. Police work was fun, and it wasn't always fun, but we loved working with each other. And then, like you said, having the old choir practice afterwards and talking about the chase that we got into and all that stuff. Yeah, I've heard that it's different now. Things were different in 2006 when I left. I've been out 18 years. It'll be 18 years this November. I've heard that things just aren't the way that they used to be.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing every generation of cops probably says that.
That's
right?
The old guys probably said that about us when we came on the job.
Right.
Yeah. It's just, it's that big wheel. It keeps going around and around.
Yeah.
When you got into homicide, were you married at the time?
I was. Yeah.
And I can't imagine I was working long hours. I can't imagine you guys were out days at a time.
There were many times we were. Right? Yeah. Yeah. It was rough on the home life. And I had, within 10 months and almost my first year in homicide was done, I had my first child. My son was born. And then my second son was born a couple of years later. And, as the years went on and they got old enough to be in Boy Scouts and Little League and all that stuff, it was hard. Mm-hmm. It was hard to start, and I didn't want to miss those things. So I was at a crossroads at one point, and luckily I had an opportunity to go to the cold case squad. And so I took that opportunity. I was very fortunate, and that was a more sane schedule. Mm-hmm. Right. And we had weekends off, and it was a day shift, permanent day shift. So we didn't have to change shifts. And I was able to spend more time with my sons, which was very important to me.
How long had you been in homicide when you got to the cold case squad?
7 years.
Okay. So
1992, I went to cold case.
You certainly paid your dues.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of guys kept going and look, I ended up getting divorced right after I retired. It presents a lot of problems, right? Mm-hmm. There's just a lot of issues that can happen, but I know I'm just cycling through guys that I worked with in homicide, and I'm trying to think of people that had not gotten divorced, and I'm having a hard time thinking of one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was rough on family life.
Yeah. When just because of the Narco series, a lot of people will contact me, young people especially. Oh, yeah, I saw the series, I read your book. It's inspired me to want to go into law enforcement. Well, that's great. I love that. I mean, to take it as a compliment, a very humbling compliment. But they ask for advice. And I tell every single one of them, the first thing you got to understand, this is not a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. This is a lifestyle.
Oh, yes.
And if you're thinking about getting married, you've got to find somebody that can put up with it. Thank the good Lord, I was lucky enough to find, Connie's my second wife, but we celebrated our 40th anniversary earlier this year. So she's put up with a lot over 40 years.
Right.
But I keep telling her I'm the best thing that ever happened to her. She just still doesn't believe it. I don't understand it.
Keep trying, Steve.
Yeah. I just duck every time I say it because I know the slap's coming.
Right. The media in Hollywood portray the job as being very glamorous and all this stuff. And yeah, it feels good when you arrest somebody and, you hear the jury say guilty, and that's a great feeling. But I don't know about glamorous. I mean, you'll never see on TV, you'll never see a detective with maggots crawling up his arm trying to fish a body out of the back of a trunk of a car, or standing knee deep in garbage in a dumpster looking for a gun. Things that we did, right? These are things that we did. And, nobody else could do that. If it's your case, you're doing that work, doing the next of kin notifications, which was
that's horrible,
brutally hard stuff to do emotionally.
Hey players, this is the end of part 1. Part 2 comes out as always on Tuesday. In the meantime, Game of Crimes is now posting interview videos on YouTube. You can find those at Game of Crimes Podcast, and I ask that you click on the subscribe and like buttons. On social media, check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Game of Crimes Podcast, and on X at Game of Crimes. Also on Facebook, type in Game of Crimes fan page and join us for some fun. Our website is gameofcrimespodcast.com. We've got a lot more information there, including all our episodes, the book list, which contains the books written by our guests, Game of Crimes merchandise, and more. And for more content, join us on patreon.com/Game of Crimes. I have several monthly episodes that range from silly to serious, so come on over and join the fun. In the meantime, everyone stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow for part 2.